2 Windows get you That was good, Bree. We enjoyed that. Yep, that's good. Yeah. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you all very much for being here with us. We have a continuation of our informational agency hearings. With us today, we have the Department of Administrative Services. We thank you all very much for being here. I just want to open up with a few remarks, though, from our co-chair, Senator Moore. Senator, you have the floor, madam.
Good afternoon, everyone. We have already, good to see everybody. Thank you for giving us some time this afternoon. We had already had a previous discussion with both of these agencies, but found that after we interviewed many others, we wanted to come back and ask some questions specifically about some of the things that we heard. So thank you, and glad to see everybody. Thank you, Mr. Sheriff.
Okay, Senator, thank you very much for those remarks. Now I would recognize the ranking member, Representative Piscopo. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome everybody. I really appreciate you coming back. A little more relaxed atmosphere here, and we're not in that kind of a tough schedule, so we're able to air things out a little bit more. And so I really appreciate you coming. Thank you very much.
And certainly I will call on our ranking member from the Senate, Senator Wong. Senator, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Napoli and Chairman Moore. I want to thank DAS and Housing for coming on. We did have some additional questions, and I appreciate that. And we're getting started, and I appreciate everybody.
Great. Thank you, Senator. And just so the public knows, we have a lot of our members who are with us on Zoom, and only a few of us who are in the room today. If you don't see a member in the room, they are attending multiple meetings at once, so they're either on the Zoom or certainly watching us on CTN. So if you have any questions or concerns for another member who's not here, just let us know. Now we will begin with DAS. Commissioner, you and your team can come on up. And if you want to go into a presentation or you want to go into questions, that's completely up to you guys.
Good afternoon. Is that working? Okay, great. Good afternoon, Representative Napoli, Senator Moore, Representative Piscopo, Senator Wong, and members of the committee. I'm pleased to be here before you today, and to the members of the public as well, and those others in the room. Pleased to come back to you and including our DAS team, joined here with my Deputy Commissioner, Darren Hobbs of Real Estate and Construction Services. For the record, I'm Michelle Gilman, Commissioner of the Department of Administrative Services, and pleased to take on any of your additional questions relative to any of our bonding requests or construction projects, other activities that we have before the Department of Administrative Services.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner, can you give the committee an update on the Office of the Medical Examiner?
Certainly, and I'm pleased to introduce, if acceptable to the committee, Dr. DeJoseph, who's the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner. She has joined us as well today, and she can speak along with us and in partnership with us as we accept and discuss the questions regarding the new facility that's underway. As we reported to you a few weeks back, our DAS construction services team has been working closely with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner and their team regarding the feasibility of a new building or renovated facility for the office. This is a complex project that requires a great deal of analysis and study due to environmental factors at the UConn Medical Hospital property. The footprint of the actual facility and the construct that it's taking shape in now. And then also because the 24/7 operation, how do we move forward on constructing that facility and meeting their expansive needs as they're a working operating facility each and every day. So a lot is going into looking at the next steps, which right now we're in the design phase. We're in the process of contracting with an architectural firm. As you may recall, we received the funding just about a year ago, December 2021. So our agency would have received that in January 2022 or so. We then went out and contracted for architectural services. That requires an RFQ process. We've gone through that process. And now we're working to finalize that contract now, which requires a number of different legal reviews, including the Attorney General's review. And then I believe it has to go before the State Contracting Standards Board, if I'm not incorrect, before we can contract with the architect officially. All told, this is the first phase of this project, the design phase. That will likely be about 18 months or so once we contract with the architectural firm. We then will go and look at the different options for design of that study. And then as we have those different options for the new facility, we will then work with your committee, work with the legislature at large and OPM around next needs for funding for the actual construction phase of that. All told, we're looking at likely the new facility or renovations being complete more likely around 2028, which I know is an unfortunate timeline. We all want this facility built sooner than later, but we're working very closely with OCME around options to assist their team and their needs and the needs of the office in the meantime, whether that's finding additional storage space, additional working space. We actually have some ideas for legislative change as well to provide some flexibility to them, either in the interim of a new facility being built or to give us more options for resiting the current facility off of the UConn campus. Right now, the statute is relatively restrictive in terms of siting the facility on the site of a medical school campus. So overall, again, working very closely with the medical examiner's office, we're planning to provide you with a detailed letter regarding the various phases of construction and the timelines associated with that, and some of the other processes I've indicated today that are complex in nature, both from a regulatory and legal standpoint. But we wanted to come to you today jointly to demonstrate that we are working together again on this complex but important critical project.
So thank you very much for that. And the committee is certainly happy to hear that you are working very closely with the agency, because when they came before us, they had some concerns about their certification, and the way they can do their jobs. But it seems to be there's a good partnership now going forward. And, a project like this, you said that design phase is about 18 months just to do that. Is that normal for this type of project?
It really is dependent on the scope of the project. Different projects require different lengths of time. So whether it's a roof repair or a renovation or a parking garage, it really depends on the various components and the scope of the project in terms of determining the length of a construction project.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely.
Senator Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Good to see you.
You too, Senator.
So, Commissioner, I think I'm a little bit more alarmed by what I heard from the medical examiner when he came before us. So I know you have the deputy with you. Was the medical examiner not available to come with you today?
I would defer to Dr. Joseph for that, but thank you, Senator.
Hello, Senator. Thank you. Dr. Gill is testifying in court today. It's one of his responsibilities as chief medical examiner.
There you go. Thank you.
Better? Okay. Thank you for the question, Senator Moore. Dr. Gill is in court today testifying as part of his duties as the chief medical examiner. So he did ask me to come on his behalf. And I was also present during his prior testimony as well before this commission. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have now.
Thank you. So the certification and the conditions that are taking place right now for the medical examiner, it's alarming to me. And I think if people had loved ones not housed properly and knowing that they had to wait to 2028 for it to be up to a standard of full accreditation, I think they would be alarmed. I'm alarmed. I'm alarmed. I want to know, like, what was the start date for this project?
The start date for when we initially came before the commission to seek the initial bond funding? Is that
Yeah.
what you're asking? I believe that was in 2021.
Okay. And is it normal for something to take 2 years to even get to the scope of where it is right now?
Well, it's my understanding that there was first an architectural firm who just gave support to DAS about whether or not a renovation and an extension were even considered at that time. And we had decided to go that route in that we were trying to be sort of fiscally responsible, but also wanted to make sure we met the needs for our constituents. So I do know that was part of the roll up. And then in addition, the various steps along the way, I'd probably have to defer to DAS for how those processes are typically undertaken. As you know, as I mentioned, Dr. Gill is in court today. I too perform autopsies and testify in court. So we're not necessarily the experts when it comes to these kind of things, and we do defer to the support of DAS for our needs.
And Senator, we can certainly speak to the additional detail regarding the timeline for this project. In addition to our Deputy of Real Estate and Construction, we have our project management team here, David Barkin, our Chief Architect for the state, as well as Peter Simmons, our Project Manager Director. So I'm happy to bring them up to answer additional questions regarding the detail of this project. I can certainly relay that in September 2020 through January of 2021, we did indeed work with OCME for a preliminary study to understand the need and look at the basic parameters of the project and what was going to be required. That helped to inform the initial bond request as well that went before the legislature in the 2021 session. That $2.5 million, as you know, was approved by the legislature during that session year. It then was on the bond commission in December 2021. And so we could not act on hiring consultants or moving forward on that design until we received the bond commission approval. So then immediately thereafter, we went to RFQ where we had 2 architectural firms bid for the design aspect of this project. And so that's where now we are in the final contract stages of negotiating that work. We'll be working with the Attorney General's office to get approval on that contract and going through some of the other steps I mentioned. It is a competitive bidding process. Again, it is complex. We do have to follow, certainly all the statutory rules around that competitive process. And so that can take some time. But this is generally a standard timeframe for these types of projects based on the scope.
Well, I did hear in the commission, in the medical examiner's testimony, he wasn't knowledgeable about what was taking place and seemed to be unsure about the timeline and what could be expected. And their accreditation should be a major concern for all of us, that there's any place that without changing the process internally or breaking any laws, that this is expedited, because I don't want to be sitting here as a legislator and something has gone wrong or we've lost our accreditation fully because it's taking so long. And I'm not sure, and maybe the deputy could tell us, I know that they don't have full accreditation. How much longer can they go under this temporary accreditation that they have?
So we are currently provisionally accredited, and our accreditation cycle comes up each September.
Please put your mic on. Thank you.
So you're currently provisional.
Currently provisional. Our accreditation cycle is each September. So we report annually back to the National Association of Medical Examiners on whether or not there have been any progress on these deficiencies. And they do take into consideration whether or not there is progress, even though we know, unfortunately, a new building or a new facility extension can't happen overnight. And they do grant extensions to provisional accreditation as long as other things don't become an issue. And certainly they're not just looking at our facilities, they're also looking at our workload, they're looking at the number of autopsies each doctor is performing, et cetera. But the facility issues were really the driving factor for the provisional status that we have now. But we will continue to defend the progress that we have for certain. And as I mentioned, they do continue to grant extensions. I don't know how many they will grant, but as long as we're able to show that progress is continuing, they will take that into consideration.
Well, thank you. And for the medical examiner, I'd really like to know that when they come back in September, what is the status of that accreditation? And does it remain provisional or are we at risk? All right. And so, Commissioner, I want to thank you because this was of grave concern, truly, with no exaggeration, when I heard how long this was taking. And so, there is a process, but I think I'm just seeing that there's some things should be a priority when we talk to our constituents about something like this that's taking place for the medical examiner. And I would hope that any place that we could move the process along, we could. I know that you were really great in sending me a timeline for the garage in Bridgeport. And I really do appreciate that. It gives me an idea of what's going on. I think for this, we should have a timeline in writing of what the expected timeline is in consideration that every September, what's going to be the story on where we are and what's the holdup, so we can have something to look at, to go back and say, well, we were expecting this to happen, and if it's not happening for this situation, what is the holdup?
We would be pleased to provide you with those updates, certainly, Senator, and really look forward to the continued partnership with OCME, again, around this critical facility and really looking at their continued needs, their growing needs moving forward. What I do want to also emphasize is that as we continue to look at options for the facility, the new facility, I think we're having continued conversations around options between now and when the new building is able to be opened. So are there additional areas across the state? Are there other opportunities to look at other workspace as well, and other locations? So we're continuing those conversations with our team and with the OCME team as well, which I think will also hopefully satisfy the accreditation team as well moving forward.
That's good to hear, Commissioner, that you're looking at some alternatives, because I really don't want to be here at the end of September and knowing that that accreditation is in jeopardy and there's not an alternative plan, because that may help them when they go back again to speak on that provisional, that there is some alternative plan and that not waiting to 2028 to make sure that everything is done. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. While we're on the topic, do you have an updated cost for the project, or is that something you'll have more information on next session?
That is really part of what the design phase will help inform in terms of the costs. And as we know, costs are rising in the construction industry as well, supply chain issues and other factors around inflation. So that design phase will actually include 3 different phases within the next 18 months. So if there's a design phase, that includes schematic design, design development, and construction documents. So that will help us to inform those budget estimates that we'll need for the next budget request that will come to you and through the state.
Thank you for your response.
Thank you.
Representative Piscopo, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll just stay on this topic just for a little while longer, if you don't mind. Thank you. As September, what's the status right now of the medical examiner's situation? When he came in earlier, earlier this month, it seemed dire straits. I mean, we're talking about refrigerated trucks out in the parking lot, that kind of thing. Pretty bad stuff. Are we there, Doctor or Commissioner?
So we do still maintain refrigerated tractor trailers in our parking lot for deceased remains. And that's because we have outgrown the refrigerated space within our walls. However, there was a statutory change that went into effect this past October that allowed us to, in a more expedited way, handle some of the unclaimed remains that we had within our facility. And so that has significantly helped us. So we greatly appreciate those changes that went through. We're getting ready to turn back one of the refrigerated tractor trailers because we have seen such an incremental decrease in the number of stored remains that we have. So I'd say we're a little less dire than we were when Dr. Gill had testified before you previously. But certainly that is one of the deficiencies, is that we are meant to have ample storage for regular caseload and peak caseload as well. So I can't say that we have totally averted the crisis, but in addition to Commissioner Gilman's testimony, we're thinking about other alternatives that could potentially be more considerate than what we have at the present time. Are there other facilities that may already be refrigerated that we could use within the state? So we're trying to get creative with their help in moving forward with other options as well.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for your efforts that way. Could you just enlighten me just a little bit better on the accreditation process? If September comes and you're showing that you're well into the design phase, you're ready, you're moving along pretty good. Do the people that give you that accreditation, will they take that into consideration in extending the provisional, or?
Yes, they will definitely take it into consideration. And we've had to do that before when we've been in jeopardy when it came to the number of autopsies per doctor. If we knew that we were given positions, but we hadn't filled them yet, they gave us consideration for that as an example. So as long as we're able to continue a dialogue with them to say that there is progress, the legislature supports us, the governor supports us, the people support our needs, we're moving in the right direction. That's something they definitely take into consideration and will continue us as provisional. We won't be able to be fully accredited in their eyes until we're able to say to them, we have no issues. So we would not be fully accredited, but we would continue to maintain provisional status.
I understand and appreciate the clarification. Where are we good? I visited the medical examiner like the day after we questioned him, and yeah, I just had to kind of talk things out with him, and he was gracious enough to come out as busy as he is. And it seemed pretty crowded. Is the location going to be right around that area, or do you have a different, are you going to move, or do you know, Commissioner, yet, or where the location is going to be, or?
So again, I think that's really part of the continued collaboration that we have with the OCME around their needs, but also regarding the statutory language. So we have been having those conversations, really recently. And so again, I think we'd like to socialize that on a broader level, certainly with this committee, with others, and with OPM, certainly the governor's office as well, as the statute is very restrictive in terms of the location being at a medical school in Connecticut. And so we may want to entertain a statutory change that gives us a little more flexibility. Perhaps it's in that general campus area, but on a different parcel of land. Perhaps it's in an entirely different area of the state altogether. Those options don't necessarily reduce the time frame that we're looking at, but it does give us options, even perhaps for a temporary facility while we're building the larger new facility. So again, want to just mention that as a point for discussion, over the weeks and perhaps, year ahead, even for next session. But that design phase is really critical in terms of determining the various options, not just for the building itself, but looking at the property, looking at the wetlands, looking at the ground below, various rock or other, impediments to building, on that property.
Thank you. And that's the legislative changes you kind of made mention of
Yes.
that we may be seeing. And yeah, so it seems that if you're building on or around that area, it's gone through pretty extensive environmental studies. So you don't anticipate a big phase 1, 2, 3 environmental assessment. Would that be kind of an obstacle in our timeline that we've been talking about, or
So I'm so sorry to interrupt, but that's probably a question best suited for our chief architect, David Barkin, who I can certainly bring up. He's got both that environmental background and the architectural background on this project. So if you'll permit, David Barkin, our chief architect. Yeah.
David Barkin, DAS Chief Architect. The environmental impact, like phase 1 through 3, I don't see that as an issue. What I do see as an issue is a site that's constrained on at least 2 sides by wetlands. And, we can't infringe upon wetlands unless we replace wetlands. Property line along the north is immediately adjacent to another Yukon property, but it's not contiguous property. It's a commercial building on Farmington Avenue. We've been in touch already with Yukon medical facility staff to talk about options both during construction to be able to use areas of their site for laydown and possibly staging for construction while while we incrementally we need swing space basically in order to fully restore, renovate the existing facility and add on to it. It's a constrained site, right? The to the east is all wetlands. I have to say that probably Yukon didn't pick the most prime piece of real estate when they gave that over to the medical examiner's office. So a lot of constraints and a lot of issues to work through, and particularly to make sure that we can come up with a logistics plan to support a renovation there without interrupting the services there. And to that reason, we're bringing on a construction manager early on in the process to inform us to help us with those logistics questions, so that we know as we're going through design what the site can accommodate and how we would do this construction and what that does to the construction delay. And I don't want to get into too much of the weeds, but there's a lot to something like this on this site.
Yeah, that was my impression also. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And then just I had a summation, but I'll let that go for a bit till I recall it. But the only other agency that came before us that might have they were totally in understanding of your job and the scope of your agency, and so they weren't critical in any way, but the pressure that we kind of feel from our constituents, we kind of portray to the agency that comes before us. And that was our Connecticut colleges and universities. They showed us slide after slide of roofs leaking and bad floors and all the kind of terribly deferred maintenance. And there's some frustration with coordinating those efforts. We were asking them hard questions about, you've had a 10-year plan. We're giving you $100 million a year. How come you're not repairing a roof? That would seem top priority. So do you sense any kind of trouble or any problems working with any of the other agencies and specifically with the colleges and universities that they have so many buildings and so many maintenance concerns?
So thank you for the question, Representative. So we frequently, in our day-to-day work, our construction services team works with other agencies, certainly judicial as well. Our Yukon partners at the CSU system. Many of our agencies have their own construction threshold statutory authority. And that is the same with the CSU system, with DEEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, DEMIS, military, it goes on and on and on. And that threshold authority is extremely helpful so that those agencies can independently do some of their own, project work, whether it's maintenance or new initiatives. Then our team certainly helps to provide support for those agencies as needed, whether it's a small project or a large. But certainly where those projects fall above the threshold for those other agency projects, that's where our team would administer those projects for an agency. So CSU has some authority now to construct their own projects, but on a project like the new HHS building at Southern or the business building at Southern Connecticut State University, our team is very engaged and a partner in those efforts because of the scope and the cost of those efforts. So I hope that answers your question to some
Yeah.
degree.
Yes, it does. I'm taking way too much time. I just remembered my last stuff. It wasn't a question, just a quick comment. That as we feel the pressure from our constituents and from the testimony we heard from the medical examiner, they will, we are, asking you very, very, we want it expedited but I don't want to hurry the project. The end product has to be, accommodate our needs now and well into the future in a very good manner. I don't want to hurry up and build something, I guess is the last comment I could put up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank
you, Representative. Commissioner, you talked about maybe perhaps looking at a statute change in the future, which got me thinking. So right now, any state agency that wants to do a project has that $500,000 threshold. And is that something that should be looked at in your personal opinion? Is it time perhaps we take a look at increasing that threshold?
So an excellent question, and thank you for that. So before the General Assembly this year, there are a few agencies that are looking to increase their construction threshold, and we have been working with them on those requests. So for example, the military and the CSU system have been working with us around their thresholds. There are a couple of different bills before the General Assembly this year. But we're supporting, I think, a $3 million change for judicial, moving to their threshold now to 3 million. And I think the same for the CSU system, if I'm
Military as well.
and military and for CSU at 3 million. Judicial changed their threshold last year. And I believe they're pursuing another change this year where we've offered testimony on, the various proposals that are before the various committees.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Sure. Thank you.
Representative Ferrara online. You have the floor, madam.
Thanks to the chair. Hi, everyone. Just a follow-up on some of my colleagues' questions. Thanks, Commissioner, for being here. I just wanted to kind of go back so we have a better understanding about the provisional accreditation specifically. I know in words, it certainly doesn't sound good to have provisional accreditation, but could you give us a little insight into what, if any, impact there actually is on our chief medical examiner and their services or recruitment efforts because of the provisional accreditation?
I'm going to test the mic. Can you hear me? So just to answer the question about provisional accreditation and what it means. So ultimately, it means that the National Association of Medical Examiners is still invested in our office and in our operations. And they still think that we're doing some things well. And they're acknowledging that there are some things where we need improvement. So it's a way for them to flag those areas and give us a goal to achieve so that we're on par with the other death investigation systems that they represent. So they're also saying at the same time that we are doing things well, which include our death investigations, and we're doing our best to maintain good turnaround times and offer good service. So in some ways, we're still doing very well in their eyes, but they've said that our facilities are getting in the way of us being fully accredited. So I don't want anyone to lose faith in the death investigation services that we're doing for certain, but we do have areas where improvement is needed. How does that impact our ability to recruit? Well, there is a significant shortage of medical examiners nationwide. There are a lot of job openings, and we currently have 2 vacancies, and we have had very minimal applicant traffic. Whether or not the accreditation status plays significantly into that, I can't be certain, but when there are fully accredited offices with new facilities that we're competing with, then I think it is contributory. So would we like to be fully accredited? Absolutely. And we're so thankful that everyone has recognized the need for our facilities to be improved upon so we can achieve that goal.
Thank you for that. It's very helpful. And just to kind of clarify, as you noted, there's a number of markers, obviously, that the accrediting body is looking at. Is it truly just the facilities, item in their assessment that you would say is contributing to the provisional accreditation?
So an office is not allowed to have any phase 2 deficiencies. Phase 2 deficiencies are considered the worst deficiency, and then there are phase 1s that are considered to be not as bad. So you can't have any phase 2 deficiencies and be fully accredited. We have 3 phase 2 deficiencies, and all of them are related to the facility. One is whether or not we have sufficient space to perform autopsies on a daily basis. The other is whether or not we have sufficient space to store remains. And the other is whether or not we have sufficient space for supplies, personnel, office space, parking, etc. So those are the 3 phase 2 deficiencies we had. If all 3 of those facility issues are remedied, we'll be fully accredited because there aren't any deficiencies within our death investigations, the autopsies that we're performing, the reports that we're issuing. None of those things are holding us back from being fully accredited. We have a few minor deficiencies in that area. For example, they recommended that our office have a statistician, but that's a phase 1 deficiency. It's not getting in the way of us being fully accredited. It's a recommendation.
Thank you for those details. It's just very helpful, I think, for, again, focusing our efforts on the facilities. And as you noted, just how critical it is in order for not just the current staff, but certainly to support the staffing of the office moving forward. So thanks so much for those answers. It was very helpful. And thanks to the chair.
Thank you, Representative. Just to switch topics a little bit. Last time you were here, we asked about indoor air quality. And what you said was that you would have the first round very, very shortly, and you were spot on. I think it came out maybe a week later. So we really thank you for that. A lot of our schools across the state are going to have access to cleaner air. So that is a high priority, and you made that a priority. So we thank you for that. About $56 million was allocated. I think you have about $450 million more. Do you think you'll get through all that?
Thank you so much for the question. You are certainly correct that we did issue the first round of funding, about $56 million in state bonding. We do expect to do another round of funding applications or awards. We plan to open up the next round of applications somewhere around July 1st of this year, with a close date for about December 1st of this, later this year, to then award funding to school districts in January or thereabouts. We will certainly utilize the remaining bonding funding that was granted to us, as well as the ARPA funding. It is difficult to predict whether we would utilize all of that, but based on the uptick of the applications that we had in this first round, and then the subsequent interest expressed by school districts since the initial round and since the last few weeks, we do expect more school districts to apply, both for new projects and potentially for retro projects that were already completed. So I think we do see that the need is there. And with additional notice, with more notification about the program overall and continued funding from the legislature and the governor, I think we'll continue to see more need moving forward.
Great, thank you. And can you provide us with a example of why some districts might have been rejected?
Certainly. So unfortunately, we did, because this was a competitive grant application or grant process, we did see about 80 applications that were denied, largely due to the following reasons, where the municipalities or the school districts did not provide an actual cost estimate for the project, which is essential to then understanding, the financial need. We also had lack of information submitted to us where the legislative body within that municipality needed to authorize the application and demonstrate as such. And so that was not provided to us. There may have also been applications where drawings or educational specifications, a project plan for the application were not submitted. So those are just a sample of some of the reasons why a school district was not found eligible for the funding in round one. Now, moving forward, we've been working closely, Deputy Commissioner Darren Hobbs and our school grants team have been working closely with school districts around the reasons why they weren't funded. Certainly all of the letters that were issued to those applications not funded did identify the reason why they did not receive the funding. And then we've been working with school districts over the last 2 to 3 weeks with their questions, how they can do better next time, and quite frankly, how we can do better in our next rollout, since this was our first pilot program in this regard. So we're really excited about launching the next round. And happy to take additional questions around specific schools. We can certainly provide information offline through various legislative inquiries that you may have either today or down the road.
And is it possible, at your convenience, of course, you can get us a list of the school districts that were unsuccessful? Just so we can take a look at that?
We certainly can.
Oh,
Yep. We can
Or,
provide that.
or a summary if that's easier for you.
Sure. We can certainly provide you with that list of school districts that were not awarded. We're happy to provide that to you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
I will recognize Representative Palio online.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if it's all right, if I could just jump back to OCME for a second. There were a couple questions that were asked by Representative Farrar that I did want to follow up on, if that's okay.
Of course you can.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner, great to see you. Just to follow up, you had mentioned about looking at other sites as a strong possibility and looking at legislation, but you mentioned that the 2028 timeline would still be the same. Can you elaborate on that a little further, given that you're looking possibly at other sites and there may be less restrictions with some of these other sites, but why would the 2028 timeline still remain the same?
Certainly. Thank you so much for that question. And if I could, I'm going to defer the question to David Barkin, again, our chief architect on the project.
Oh, thank you, David Barkin. I do believe, and if it might have been misheard, the selecting a new site would extend the period of construction somewhat. I'm sorry, I should really say the project duration somewhat. I think the actual construction period itself would get reduced because we could build a new facility without interrupting the operations of the existing facility, which is a clear advantage. But there are other steps that would come into place. We would be looking at a SEPA process because there would be a state action being taken. So we would have to look at those, SEPA being our version of planning and zoning, to make sure that there was a public process for any new site. It would be easier probably if we could identify state-owned property, existing state-owned property, where we could place a new facility, but then we get into the statutory language change because we don't have any state property other than at UConn Medical Center. And the only other medical school in the state is Yale, I think. So yes, Quinnipiac, pardon me. Yes, you're right. Still, we don't own property at either of those institutions. So we'd have to go through SEPA. We would be back to the drawing board with design consultants, because when we advertise for a project, we advertise the scope and budget. And what we advertise for would be a very different project. It would be a new building, it would be a larger building, and it would have a larger capital impact. So we would need a larger authorization for construction. And right now we have a 30,000 square foot building with an addition. That was what our cost model currently is built on and what is in the current authorization. If it's determined that it's a better idea to go to a new facility, then there's going to have to be a return at some point to the legislature for an additional authorization. These things will extend the time. Ultimately, the solution might be better because it'll be a brand new facility rather than a renovation. That's would always be preferable, perhaps on a facility on a piece of property that would allow for future expansion, which would be desirable. Like I said, this site is particularly constrained and a challenge that way. So there'd be a lot more steps involved. It's certainly possible.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Dr. DeJoseph, you had mentioned some of the phase 2 deficiencies. Can you just talk about how long or what type of backlog that creates with autopsies and what the current turnaround time is, or if it creates how much of a longer turnaround time to perform those autopsies, given the deficiencies that you've laid out with the accreditation process?
Certainly. So I think we do our best not to have a backlog on the performance of autopsies, in that we staff enough doctors to be able to get through the caseload each day. However, it does make our time in the autopsy room quite extended, where sometimes we may start examinations about 9:30 and not finish until 2:30 in the afternoon. So we have adequate staffing in order to be able to do that. But other things do then get deferred, such as requiring additional contracted services for body transportation, because our staff are otherwise tied up with us in the autopsy room. It doesn't allow for the doctors to have sufficient time to complete some of the paperwork associated with the cases on that day. And so therefore, we may require additional work to be able to maintain our turnaround times at goal. So we do our best not to delay anything for the families. That's really our primary objective. And the only time that probably does come into play would be on a Monday, because we have reduced staffing on the weekends just because we can't work everybody every day. So we'd have some people off, but we are operational all the time. So we do the best we can not to have a backlog when it comes to people who need examination. We try to make that priority number one. And the other work either has to shift to contracted trade service if our staff aren't available, and our turnaround times do suffer on the paperwork side.
Okay. So can you just clarify why, if there isn't a backlog, why that would be cited?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat the question? I didn't hear the end.
Okay, so if there isn't a backlog in terms of with the provisional accreditation, why in fact that would be something that would be cited as a phase 2 deficiency, just following up on your answer.
So the question is more whether or not there's sufficient space to perform autopsies effectively. And in our current room, we have 4 autopsy tables all within one space. We've got a doctor at each table. We have 1 or 2 techs at each table. We have 2 photographers. We have student learners. The room is very crowded, and it does not allow me, for example, to move around the room without moving something out of my way. So in terms of being able to efficiently and effectively perform the examinations, that's not happening in the current space. In addition, it's really ideal if we have the opportunity to do a hybrid of both autopsy examinations on a day and complete paperwork. But when we're working into the afternoon hours and have not yet left the autopsy room because we have to do 3 continuous cases in a row, it just doesn't allow a good balance with the work that we have to do on a day-to-day basis. And so NAME looks at that and all of the ripple effects of keeping us tied to that room for that period of time.
Thank you. Your testimony has been very helpful today in answering these questions and giving us what you face every day and the limitations that you face every day, and in working to during these constraining times and with the facility that is certainly not adequate. This is extremely helpful to have you here and to be able to answer these questions. I guess I would just follow up with the last piece, with looking at families that we represent and having loved ones there, and wanting to be very responsive to families, as you've mentioned, and not having them wait. You mentioned in terms of having the remains with trailers, you said 1 trailer has been removed. but how many are still stored? The human remains of loved ones, of family members, in trailers or outside of the main facility.
So it sort of depends on our volume on a day-to-day basis. On an average day, we have about 10 new investigations to perform. In addition to the 10 that we're performing that day, sort of in addition to the 10 from the day before. So our average daily census is at least 30. But then in addition, any remains that haven't been picked up within a day after their examination will remain with us until their family is able to claim those remains. And so that may require them to physically pull together funds, to actually have time together to meet with the funeral home. And so we want to make certain that they don't feel any undue pressure from us. And so we're certainly content in keeping their loved one with us as long as need be. So within our facility, we have storage for about 90 decedents within our walls. And so above and beyond that number would be persons that end up being stored in the trailers. And so that tends to be the unclaimed persons. So maybe loved ones have not been found, or perhaps there are other issues that are making it more challenging for the family to get the funds together. So at this time, I don't know exactly how many are stored in the trailers, but to say that we're able to release one of the trailers because it's no longer needed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity. Thank you to the folks here today to answer these questions.
Thank you, Representative. And just one quick question around school construction. Do you expect any delays, or were you able to just shift personnel around and the projects will go on as they should?
This is for the school construction
Yes.
grant program. So on a monthly basis, we issue grant awards for what we call the non-priority list. And those are smaller projects like roof or boiler repairs, other emergency repairs that may come to our agency for approval. So those grants go out on a monthly basis, and they don't require legislative approval like the priority list. So as you know, the priority list is currently before the legislature. We issue that list to the Education Committee annually as part of our requirements. And then once that that authority or that bond approval is granted, we'll then work with the school districts to manage and oversee those larger priority awards for either renovation or new grant construction. And so that process has been moving well. We are looking to expand that team. And it is a good process that's in place. Both internally, we have our audit function of the grant program that's under our business office once that program came back to DAS. So that team has split a bit in terms of its function. But that grant team is actually overseeing some other smaller grant items as well through OPM. We've been providing some oversight to a few projects that have received ARPA funding and other projects for communities. So continue to be excited to do that work and to support our communities.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank
Senator Moore, you have the floor.
Thank you. Really quickly. So have you lost the school construction manager?
I'm so sorry. Can you restate?
I said it. The school construction manager, what's the status of that?
So as you may know, our previous school construction grants director did resign earlier this year, and we're currently evaluating next steps to replace that position. Our team, as I just mentioned, is still continues to meet their daily work, working with school districts around the administration of both the non-priority list and the priority list grants, and then certainly now the HVAC awards as well, both the current program and then the future program in place. And at this time, Deputy Commissioner Darren Hobbs, along with other members of our team, are overseeing that grant operation on a daily basis.
So are you recruiting a new manager? Are you in that process?
Yeah, we're evaluating next steps in terms of what that process should look like, the skill set that we want to oversee that team. So we're still working internally on next steps, but be assured certainly that the work is getting done. Again, through our leadership with both Darren and other members of our team. So we're meeting requests for school districts, again, taking on more work with the HVAC program and meeting the needs of our schools and our community programs.
So would you say that the exit of that construction manager is not creating a delay in the projects?
Correct. Yes. Again, we were very pleased to announce the HVAC grant awards relatively on schedule. We had hoped to announce the HVAC awards slightly earlier in 2023, but we felt it was important to allow communities to have till the end of February to provide additional documentation as needed around town referendums that may have been required to authorize the funding for any HVAC grant commitments. And so we allowed for that to continue through the end of February and then announced the round of grants in April. But we wanted to be able to do that efficiently as, again, municipalities, school districts are looking at their municipal budget projects and going through, municipal budget processes as well. And then again, also important for us to be able to announce the next phase of the grant announcements for the HVAC program and the schedule for the next round of applications.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Dr. Joseph, for very thorough answers. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. And let me remind our members that we have a few minutes left. And I recognize Representative Veach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will make this brief as most of my questions have already been answered. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. One question I did have, I know that you said one trailer was leaving, but you still had some there, but you couldn't really answer how many trailers were currently there. Can you tell me how long they've been there?
I can answer how many trailers we have. We have two,
Two. Okay.
but I don't know how many decedents are inside the trailers. That was the part of it I
Oh,
couldn't answer. at
So
this
you
time.
only have two and one is getting ready to go.
We have three. One is leaving.
Okay, so you have two currently there, one is leaving, so three,
Yes.
a total of three. Okay, and how long have you had this backlog in terms of the trailers that have been there? 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3
It's
years?
been several years. We had to add more during COVID for a variety of reasons.
Understandable.
One being that our death investigations increased, mainly due to the opioid epidemic and the ongoing overdose investigations. But in addition, we did find that during COVID, it was much more difficult for families to navigate the situation of claiming their remains of their loved one. And so that certainly added to the number of people we had in our facility at any one time as well. And I mentioned the statutory change, which has allowed us to be the custodians of unclaimed remains. And so we are now allowed to authorize the disposition of those persons. So that allows us to act much more efficiently on our own. So that's allowed us to give up the additional trailer space.
Thank you for your answers and thank you all for being here, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Zupkis, you have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be quick as well. Doctor, I just wanted to kind of follow up on those questions. I had the same questions, and I think I heard you say that you weren't sure how many remains are in the trailers. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What's the longest, this is all new to me, so it's interesting, but how long have you had the longest remain? Like, what is the average? You have them for a week and now you've had some still from COVID?
Yeah, I would say the average is about 5 to 7 days. But you have to bear in mind too, some of the decedents that we're investigating may not be identified. And that adds another layer of concern for us before we move them to a disposition where we don't know who they are yet. So there's police involved in the investigations of those persons. We're trying efforts to get a DNA profile. So there are other things that may confound some of the unidentified persons who remain with us longer.
Okay. And you said it cost to have people come and pick up the remains of their loved ones. What does it cost?
No, there is no cost.
Oh, I was curious about that because I was like, we pay, they have to pay, but I thought that was a comment you said, so I apologize. I misunderstood.
Phrase, the funeral home may assess a transport fee to the family
it.
picking up
Mhm.
their loved ones, but there's no fee that we charge as a state agency for storing the remains.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is regarding your phase 2 deficiencies. You were talking about due to space, that was one of the deficiencies, I believe, for phase 2. And what is the required size so you won't be in a deficiency? Like, what does the regulation say that you have to be this big of space? And how big is the space that you have now?
Have that jotted down as a note here somewhere. Our current autopsy room is 1,440 square feet. And we have the 4 autopsy workstations. I believe in similar offices, for example, New Mexico, which also is a statewide medical examiner system, serving a little smaller population. I think they have about 2 million people. They have 16 autopsy tables to our 4.
Mhm.
So the tables allow us to move through the examinations more quickly. They allow us to have more doctors downstairs at one time. We have a position count of 10 doctors, but I can only have 4 on staff each day because I don't have anywhere for them to work. So the more tables we have, the more ability we have to get through the work more efficiently. And in addition, just room to move about the space.
Yes, thank you. Understood. And I understand that, but I guess my question is, due to the if I'm understanding you correctly, due to the space, the 1,440 feet, that puts you into the phase 2 deficiency?
Yes, so during our site visit, which was this past year, the inspector did her site visit virtually, but she wanted to see the autopsy room during autopsy time. And she could see that there is no room for us to move about the space and effectively get our work accomplished, although we do our darndest to get it accomplished at the present time.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for that. But again, my question is, what is the space? If right now you have 1,440 square feet, to get out of that deficiency, what do you need? 2,500 square feet? Do you need 2,000 square feet? 1,500 square feet?
So that'll all be part of the first phase of the construction process. The architect that's been retained is using a consultant who's built several other medical examiners' offices throughout the country. And there's a working group out of the Institutes of Justice that has put forth some recommendations for how much space there should be. That's almost at a per capita basis, based on the number of examinations you do. So all that information will come out of that study part of the initial phase of construction. So we're going to seek those recommendations, and that will help determine the feasibility of a renovation and build on versus new facility.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate your answers.
Great, thank you. And just in closing, we thank you all very much for being here in a very short period of time. We think you made some progress. We can clearly see that there's good collaboration between both agencies. And if our subcommittee can help with anything, feel free to let us know. But thanks for the good work that you all are doing. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Our next state agency is the Department of Housing, Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner. It's great to see you both. Please feel free to come on up with your team, and you can begin when you're ready. If you want to go into a small, a quick presentation, or if you want to go right into questions, that's up to you guys.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I don't have my glasses.
Take your time.
Good afternoon, Senator Moore, Representative Napoli, Senator Anwar, and Representative Piscopo. Thank you for having us here today. I have my Deputy Commissioner, Brenda McGee, as well as the Director of Housing Research and anything else that we need from Michael's department, Michael Santora. We can go ahead and get your questions and see give you some answers.
Okay, great. At this point, I'll turn it over to our co-chair, Senator Moore, who also chairs the Housing Committee, who has been doing great work around this issue. Senator, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Commissioner. As the chair of housing, I've had this discussion in many places. I'm trying to understand what is the overall plan for housing, and how are you working with collaborating between what the governor would like to do and what the housing committee is working on. And specifically, I'm trying to figure out for the Housing Trust Fund, can you provide some information on the workforce development housing and where you are on that, and also with the flexible housing? I don't know if you saw the budget that came out of finance on housing, and if you could speak to that.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for that question, Senator Moore. The budget of the governor had $600 million for housing. $300 million is for our regular affordable housing, supportive housing, to target those incomes between 30% of the area median income up to 60% of the area median income and 80%. 200 of that 600 is for, in the budget says workforce, but it's really middle income, is to address the shortage of housing and housing that provides affordable rents to those young professionals and middle income people. And $100 million is for the time to own, the program that provides the down payment assistance up to $50,000 forgivable loan to those individuals that are between 60 up to 100% of the area median income. In comparison with the budget from the committee, we have $500 million. So that means that with the governor's budget, we were projecting 6,400 units. With the budget of the committee, we'll probably be doing about a little over 5,000 units. So basically kind of a decrease of 800 units. Senator, did I answer your question?
Okay, and yes, somewhat. So let me ask you, did you see from finance, what came out of finance on the budget?
Yes, that's how I was comparing the portion for housing. The governor proposed 600, the committee proposed 500.
And so you said, what is the amount of units that would be decreased?
Michael, about 800, right?
Okay, so when we look at the Housing Trust Fund, the workforce development housing,
Yes.
how much housing can you create? And what is the time span for getting that done?
So the $200 million for the workforce middle income housing
Yes.
will create 2,000 units. It's 2 years. It's for, we are working with the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority as well with banks and private institutions to make and develop a process that is very efficient. Is basically we are mirroring what we're doing with the time to own where we are working with the financial institutions. They do the underwriting. They provide all the information to the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, and a person can get approved. Once they get approved for a mortgage, they also get approved for the down payment assistance. What we're doing with the development side is basically engaging the banks and for-profit developers where they already have projects that are in the pipeline and that they're ready to proceed. But because of the interest rate is pretty high, we're incentivizing with some loans. There's no subsidy, but loans at lower interest rate between 1% and 3%, so that they can go ahead and produce those units. And in exchange, we can get some affordable units for those income between 60% and 120% of the area median income. Young professionals, people that are nurses and some other workers that really are paying more than 50% of their income. So what we're trying to do is to address the issue on the lower end, on the middle, and then also being able to provide the homeownership assistance to those individuals that want to be homeowners and don't want to be renters.
So when we talk about the workforce development and creating housing for them, is there income consideration, or is it their profession that's considered?
Income between 60% to 120% of the area median income. Michael, if you help me, do you have the incomes, an example?
Off the top of my head, the current statewide area median income for an average family of four is 112,600. So you would be talking an additional 20% on top of that. So roughly $130,000 for an average family of four or below for middle income housing.
And that's for a family of four?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. And now I'm just going to move on. I've got a lot of questions, but I want to give everybody an opportunity. I'm trying to look at what we're trying to do in creating energy efficient homes. And right now there's $150,000 proposed over 4 years to do retrofitting of multifamily homes. And in the Senate Bill 4, it actually says 2 to 4 family units, not owner occupied. Now, I want to ask this question of you because I'm receiving requests to make it owner occupied and to do one family. I wanted to ask you, like, how does that impact the creation of not new housing, but taking houses that are not up to par, up to standard right now, and making them affordable?
So let me see if I understood your question. You're asking about 1 to 2 family or 1 to 4 family?
Right now, the legislation says 2 to 4.
Oh, 2 to 4.
And I'm getting requests for making it single family also. In addition to that, if in the bigger picture of creating this, I want to make sure that what we're doing, what's the most beneficial to get more units available for people that are energy efficient, but also how would you work with DEEP, regardless of which way we do it? How are you working with DEEP regarding the multi-family retrofit?
We work very well with DEEP. We have been working on some energy consumption for residents of affordable housing. I don't know the program on retrofitting. What I can talk about is what we do in our preservation program. So we get multifamily units that we provide funding to preserve them and also to bring them up to code with energy efficient, and basically anything that needs to be done in order to last for another 10, 15 years.
Now, what program does that fall under? Is that Energize Connecticut?
Sorry, what was that?
To energize.
So that's within our regular housing development. We do preservation and we also do new construction.
And are they single family or are they multifamily?
These are for multifamily.
Do you do any single family?
Michael?
Thank you. And sorry, I didn't introduce myself earlier. Mike Santoro. I'm the Director of Policy and Research at the department. Senator, yes, we have one program in particular comes to mind immediately, the Energy Conservation Loan Program, which is directly intended and targeted at individual homeowners and energy improvements for those homeowners. That Energy Conservation Loan Program is administered through one of the local CDFI's, Community Development Investment Funds, in this case, Capital for Change. That Energy Conservation Loan Program leverages the Weatherization Assistance Program through the Department of Social Services, as well as HES. I believe, you know, Senator, everything that we do tries to take advantage of as many funding opportunities as we can. That is, we leverage our dollars with as many other resources as we can tap. We're familiar with what DEEP is doing, particularly around SCEF and the RES programs. Those again are targeted predominantly at multifamily, but for the single family, our Energy Conservation Loan Program does in fact help individual homeowners. And those are units generally one single or duplex homes. They can do up to 4, but that's a very rare occurrence. Predominantly they are single family assistance programs.
All right, thank you. I'm going to let some other people ask some questions and I'll come back and circle back. But thank you for responding to those questions.
Thank you for your questions,
Thank you,
Senator.
Chair. Thank you.
for your questions. A question that I have is, you know, through the committee process, we looked at the way people were living around our state, and some people were living in inhumane habitats. So we looked at the receivership program. How would you update that program so we can utilize it and get it running quickly?
I'm going to ask Michael to respond to that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Representative Napoli, the rent receivership program is one which has not been used by our department probably in more than 25 years. The way rent receivership works right now is municipality brings a judicial order. The Attorney General's office actually brings an action to place a receiver. It is not something that our department does or has familiarity with. It requires it requires judicial action to occur. I'm not sure how we could make use of the $25 million a year that's being proposed by the committee for this activity. We would be more than happy to talk to the crafters to understand what their intent is. The way this current statutes read and the current legal process works, I'm not sure we can make effective use of those funds.
Thank you. And in House Bill 5001, there's a lot of conversation around supportive housing. Do you have a plan for that and to address that quickly?
Well, for supportive housing, everything that we do, we incorporate supportive housing. For all the programs, we ask at least 20% of the units to be supportive housing. What the issue that we have right now is services. So we provide the units for individuals and families between 30% and 50% of the area median income. Service providers usually, sometimes they struggle finding resources for the services. Michael, do you want to add anything else?
Thank you, Commissioner. To support what the Commissioner was saying, everything that we do can and will usually incorporate supportive housing. We would prefer to build communities where we are not building a property or a full development that is targeted at that population group. We would rather incorporate them into everything that we do. That being said, as the Commissioner indicated, the real key to doing more supportive housing is to have more supportive services, and in particular, support service dollars available to support those units. The ideal mix from all the studies that we have seen is between 20 and 25% of any given property targeted to supportive housing services. And we support that in both what we do and in our collaborations with the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority and their administration of the low-income housing tax credit program.
Thank you for that response. Any further questions from anyone in the room? Representative Piscopo, you have the floor.
Thank you. The good chair asked my question on the receivership fund, but I just wanted to thank you, Commissioner, and our former colleague. I see him there, Deputy Commissioner. Good to see you. You look great. Just a general question, Commissioner, because I guess this is an advantage of coming back after the fact, if you will, when you saw the bond package go out. Are you satisfied with it? Is there any line items or anything you are disappointed in or champion?
I can give a couple of comments. One is on the 75 million for time to own, which is a great program. It has a line there that says capital improvement, I think. Did you have that? And I don't know what that meant, because the down payment assistance we are so happy with the program that is so efficient and it runs really well that adding anything else is just gonna basically give us a little, we will have to create a different program. It's not the same.
Thank you for the question. And the spirit of that initiative was, often we give new homeowners the down payment assistance, but sometimes something happens and, they can't replace a gutter or, they can't make a repair. And of course, the house devalues quickly. So to compensate for that, we made that modification. Certainly something we could have a conversation about though, going forward. Okay.
Yes.
Rep. Piscopo, you have the floor, sir.
That's good. Again, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to go online. Representative Mashinsky, you have the floor, madam.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I have two questions. In my town of Wallingford, there's a 4-year waiting list for senior housing, especially for single seniors who are their spouse has died or they didn't have a
Representative
spouse.
Mashinsky, I'm sorry. Can you speak a little louder, please? Thank you.
Sure. In my town of Wallingford, there's a 4-year waiting list for senior housing. And it's especially difficult financially for people who are single, elderly, who don't have a spouse to have financial support in a rental. So one question is, what can we do in our town to reduce the 4-year waiting list? And my second question is, for my constituents who have multiple sclerosis and aging parents, what can we do to build more units where they could be supported and get the medical help they need when they cannot rely on their parents?
Thank you for that question. The first one in Wallingford, we actually have a couple of projects. I think one is seniors, if I'm not mistaken, and we are incentivizing and working with the housing authority to do more. We just finished a rehabilitation of some units there too. So Michael, on the second question, could you help me out?
Thank you, Commissioner. I think we need to continue to support our local housing authorities in terms of their capacity to develop. In particular, as it relates to elderly housing historically, the 92 small housing authorities that we have here in the state of Connecticut have been the largest producers of elderly housing. So any support that we can provide to help them do their job and create opportunities locally, I think would go a long way to expanding that opportunity. In your community, in particular, Wallingford, as the commissioner pointed out, there are 2 projects underway, one of which is targeted at the elderly. But we would certainly be happy to engage with the local housing authority to explore additional opportunities, not just for elderly housing, but for elderly housing in particular.
Okay, and on the MS, constituents with MS who are being cared for by elderly parents, and they will need to be at some point in a unit on their own. What can we do for them?
Thank you. If we understand the question, you're asking about what opportunities we can provide to individuals who have medical needs.
Yes, specifically the multiple sclerosis, which makes multiple sclerosis makes the person more and more dependent on a caretaker as the disease progresses.
So just to clarify, what the good rep is saying is that she has constituents in Wallingford in her district who suffer from MS, and she wants to get them better housing opportunities. How can she do that? Thank you.
I'm not sure that there is a way other than identify an MS service provider. We'd be happy to work with them in the production of housing opportunities to support that population group. That really is the gist of supportive housing in general, where we have a service provider who is willing to work with our housing development team or a housing developer to create those opportunities to leverage support services with the availability of affordable housing. We just did a project in Simsbury. I believe it's Ojakian Commons, that's specifically targeted at the MS population, if I remember correctly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Ferraro, you have the floor, madam.
Thank you, the chair. Thank you again to the commissioner and your wonderful team, and a big hello to our former colleague, new Deputy Commissioner McGee. Nice to see you. I did have kind of a quick comment and then a question, just kind of building off of Representative Mushinski's question. You know, I think a lot of us hear from our constituents the need, particularly for seniors, to have more options for housing. And I think what I often hear as a response is senior specific housing. But I just want to flag that I think one of the things that our seniors are looking for is not necessarily senior specific housing, but there's housing that they can afford that is in a diverse community setting. So I just want to be clear about that, because I think our default is often senior specific housing. But I think the research and the quality of life really points to that seniors are seeking and benefit when they are in housing that has a diverse age group. So I just kind of wanted to note that moving forward, but I appreciate your responses to Representative Mushinski. And then my question is actually a little bit more at the investments that you all noted, that the governor proposed, and similarly that we put forward in the Finance Committee. I just wanted to hear your approach, particularly around how these investments would be maximizing or kind of making the most of localities where there is transit-oriented development opportunities, or where there are transit hubs, really, again, to kind of maximize the dollars that we're putting forward as a state. So could you kind of comment on that overall, and how you're looking to approach that with these dollars?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. The way that we're maximizing our dollars is that the state resources are combined with some federal resources, like the low-income housing tax credits, the 9%, the 4% that the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority manages. We also utilize the qualified allocation plan from the department, from Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, to give basically points, if you will, for transit-oriented developments, for urban development and also for developments in our small communities. We have created a pipeline of projects, and we advocate and provide technical assistance to small developers, to small communities, small municipalities, as well as nonprofit and for-profit developers. In our pipeline, we have we have about 3,400 units that are in the process in different part of the state. That's in all the counties we have projects. And that is because we have been working with the municipalities and also with developers, incentivizing and providing technical assistance to create more housing that is affordable to the residents of those communities.
Thank you, Commissioner. So what I'm hearing from you is, pursuing a similar approach, it sounds like that's happened with some of the maximization of the federal dollars and some of the state funds, that be it the 600 million, the 500 million, whatever investments we'd be making forward, there would continue to be, a point system that would acknowledge the real prioritization of the need of these housing units within and by transit hubs. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. An example is that the past 4 years, we utilize about $500 million between the state and federal resources, and we leverage those for about $3 billion in development activities. So we try to maximize other people's money so that we can advance and produce more units, as well as preserve the units that we have.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate the detail in that area. I think especially in representing a community where there's several transit hubs that our state has invested in, I always want to make sure that we're putting more dollars towards housing that, as you said, leverages and maximizes those transit investments we've already made. So I appreciate you clarifying that, and welcome any feedback on what we can further do as a legislature to support that. So thank you for those comments. And again, welcome to our former colleague, Deputy Commissioner McGee, and thanks to the chair.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Now I would recognize our co-chair, Senator Moore. Senator, you have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is be my last. I just want to invite the commissioner and the staff as the chair of housing back to another meeting. So let's sit down and figure out how this all works together so we can promote what's best for the state and how we spend the dollars of the residents of the state of Connecticut, that we make sure that we're working and collaboratively to come up with the best package that we can as this legislation moves along. So I speak on behalf of my co-chair, Representative Luxembourg, and members of the Housing Committee to ask you to come back again, and also from members of the finance team that have looked at the budget also and how we're appropriating dollars. So that invitation is open. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Next, I would recognize Representative Baumgartner online. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, Director, and Deputy Commissioner. Great to see a familiar face there for coming out today. Just a few questions. I'd like to align my remarks with my House colleagues, Representative Mashinsky, regarding just again the need to develop housing for our seniors, and would also like to align my remarks made by Representative Farrar regarding that housing for our seniors can be mixed with folks of all economic backgrounds and age groups. And so in Groton, for example, our housing authority is interested in expanding out of the seniors only domain, if you will, and exploring offering affordable housing for all families, not just our elderly families. So I very much look forward to DOH getting a lot of these new programs off the ground I guess my only question would be regarding the receivership fund. I think the intention, well, I don't want to speak, speak for anyone, but I think there's definitely a need to address some of the deficiencies that exist within a lot of our housing that is, for low-income families in Connecticut, particularly in my district. We've had some issues with the project-based Section 8 housing development. And one question I have is just with respect to the issue of ensuring that we're not also subsidizing the lack of investment made by, private property managers and those interests, at the expense of taxpayers. So can you just speak to how we can ensure that, we can, invest in our, low-income housing stock without subsidizing the developers for not investing in properly in those not investing properly in those properties for many years.
Thank you for that question. We are really trying to make sure that people are living in good conditions and not substandard conditions for those preservation deals that we have. We make sure that if there are for-profit developers or non-profit developers, that they have some skin in the game, and that their responsibility to ensure that they are providing the resources to these developments has been there. Projects, usually the ones that have come to us for preservation, they have taken a life of more than 25 years. So they do need repairs, and they need recapitalization, restructure of those deals. And we want to make sure that those deals are preserved, because we have many units that are affordable that the compliance period has ended from tax credits. And we have, I don't know if you saw an article in the newspaper about, they were citing about 5,000 units that we are paying attention to, because we don't want to lose the affordable housing stock that we have. So that we at the department take it very seriously, and we're not enriching any developer when they are doing a preservation deal. Michael?
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'd like to just expand a little bit on what the Commissioner's talking about. When we look at a preservation deal, if the property has simply had what I would call regular wear and tear, or just, it has deteriorated over time due to just normal use. As the Commissioner pointed out, we're talking about 25, 35, even 45-year-old projects. They need revitalization. I believe you may be talking about those properties that are younger than that have literally been let go by their owner, and have those who have taken advantage of the availability of HUD project-based subsidies. We try not to deal with those developers. I'll say it that way. We would look for a change in ownership under those circumstances. We do not obviously want to lose the properties, and we do whatever we can to make sure that we in fact preserve the affordable housing that exists. But to mirror what the Commissioner said, we go out of our way to make sure that we are not unduly enriching, in particular, our for-profit community.
Well, thank you for those reassurances, Commissioner, and your team. And I have no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. I don't see any further questions. So Commissioner, I want to thank you and your team for being here. And I also want to publicly congratulate our former House member, who's now your deputy. We're excited to have him on your team, and he certainly is an expert on these issues. And look, I mean, housing is something that our governor and the leadership in this building is really committed to. And, we all know that we have people like you who are dedicated to help us get this done. And just going forward, if we can ever help with anything from a legislative perspective, please feel free to lean on any of us. And we thank you for your good work. And thanks again for being here.
Thank you very much. And likewise, my department and I are available anytime for any questions or any comment, feedback. The only thing that we can do is work together so that we can make our state better for our residents.
Touche. Thank you. Okay, that concludes our meetings for the day. I just want to, just in closing, I want to thank all the members, especially for all of you who jumped online to participate. Those of you who are here, it's clear that our state agencies are doing everything that they can to get the job done, and we're very happy about that. Some closing remarks from our co-chair, Senator Moore. You have the floor, madam.
I just want to say thank you to everybody, and it was very helpful. Sometimes we're better off going back after we know a little bit more information. So thank you all.
Great. Thank you, Senator. And I recognize our good ranking member, Representative Piscopo.
Thank the members of the subcommittee. Thank everybody that came, and I appreciate it. This was a good exercise. I learned a lot. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you, Representative. And I think Senator Juan is with us. Senator Juan? He might have just stepped out. Okay, at this point, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.